Hey everybody, Josh Collacchi here with on Roto Curve with today's pitching picks. Today is Tuesday, August 18th, and we got a 15-game slate today. It's the first big one we've had in a few days. All the games start at 7:05 or later, so every pitcher will be in available to be used in DraftKings, FanDuel, Fantasy Aces, and all the rest of those sites. So without further ado, let's get right into it. There are three aces that pitch today, and the first one, of course, is Clayton Kershaw. He's the top option on every single site. I mean, what else can you say about this guy? He's been the most dominant pitcher in baseball, and he's well worth his price to a certain point. He's just incredibly high price today on almost every site. He's 15,000 on DraftKings, which is absurd. He's 13,400 on FanDuel, which is over 33% of your budget, and that's just an absurd price to pay for anyone. But if you're going to expect over 33% of your points, he's worth taking. But I'm not sure he can provide that, especially against a tough offense in terms of striking hitters out, and that's against the Oakland Athletics. The other two aces are Jacob deGrom against the Baltimore Orioles and Francisco Liriano against the Diamondbacks. I like deGrom against the Orioles simply because of his strikeout ability, and the Orioles struggles in terms of putting the ball in play against right-handed hitters or pitching. But the problem is with the Orioles, they've been on fire. Chris Davis is the hottest hitter in baseball. Adam Jones has been hitting the ball well. They have Gerardo Parra on the top of that lineup, Manny Machado. Their offense is very good. DeGrom has actually been a little bit worse, quote unquote, there on the road so far this season. Now, he is pitching at Camden Yards, which is a hitter's park, so he doesn't have as much value, I guess, as he would if he was pitching at home in Citi Field, but I still like him in tournament because of his ability to strike hitters out. The last guy is Francisco Liriano against the Diamondbacks. His ERA is 2 runs higher at home this season, which is odd because the PNC Park is a pitcher's park. Now, he is pitching at home. We just discussed how he has some bit of a struggle there, but the interesting thing to look at is his whip and batting average allowed is relatively the same for home and away splits, so that ERA may come to something else, and that's the fact that he's given up a lot more home runs there. Now, I can't use him in cash games, as I've discussed before with this Arizona Diamondbacks offense. They have a lot of guys that can hit both sides of the plate, and obviously David Peralta is the top guy against right-handed pitching, but he won't be playing against left-handed pitching. Now, they have Paul Goldschmidt in the middle of that order. Washington Castillo hits both left-handed and right-handed pitchers well. Aaron Hill's been hitting the ball well lately against lefties. They have a lot of guys that hit both left-handed and right-handed pitching. And with Liriano struggling a little bit more at home, and the fact that that Diamondbacks offense is on fire, I'm not sure I can use him in cash. Now, I can use it in tournaments, by the way, because the one thing about Liriano is he has an excellent changeup. So against a lot of right-handed hitters in that Diamondbacks order, he can use that to advantage and strike a lot of guys out. And he showed that in his first start against the Diamondbacks earlier this season, where he allowed just 2 hits, struck out 7. He did have 6 walks, but didn't give up any runs. So of those 3 aces, I love Kershaw, of course, but everyone does. And I can't use deGrom and Liriano in anything else than tournaments today, simply because of their matchups and some other things going against them. But there are some cheaper pitchers I'd like to discuss. There's some mid-tier guys, and there's a few cheaper guys. The first one is Garrett Richards against the Chicago White Sox. Richards is a different pitcher at home this season. He has a 2.53 ERA, has a whip of under 1, and it's a strikeout per 9 of just under 9 per game, which means it's striking out just under 1 per inning, which is big for fantasy. And he's averaging about 10 fantasy points or a little bit more at home as he is on the road, as in on FanDuel. He's averaging about 6 or 7 more fantasy points. And that's a big deal because a guy like that that's had a relatively big sample size at this point in the season, when he's pitching at home, it's something to look at. He faces the White Sox offense, who's really one of the worst in baseball against lefties, as we just saw last night against Haney, but also against righties as well. So a guy like Richards has some decent upside, and actually wouldn't mind using him in cash if you think that he's going to be able to put together a good game. That being said, he hasn't been that strikeout guy he promised to be earlier in his career. So I think for him, his upside is a little bit limited, although that White Sox offense does struggle. So if you're looking at a guy that can get you 15 to 20 points on DraftKings or 12 to 15 points on FanDuel, he might be your guy. But at his price, I'm not sure you'd be willing to pay that. I do like him, but the price might not match considering the rest of the options for today. Next cheap guy, or relatively cheaper guy, if you're looking at Kershaw's price, is James Shields against the Atlanta Braves. Shields faces that Braves offense that lacks power in a pitcher's park in San Diego at Petco Park. And the Braves have the least amount of home runs in baseball. And it's weird because when you look at James Shields, the one thing he has struggled with this year is giving up home runs. It's given up 24 on the season, and I believe I think 13 of those are at home, which is crazy to think about because of how big Petco Park is. But that's the one thing he has struggled with. In this matchup against the Braves offense, they're struggling anyway. They don't hit many home runs, which I just mentioned. And that's huge because the one thing that Shields struggles with, his opponent struggles with as well. And that makes for a great matchup for him, especially at home at Petco Park. Next guy is Jake Odorizzi against Houston Astros. Odorizzi is strictly a GPP option, and you've heard me talk about this before against the Houston Astros offense. They strike out a ton, but they also have the ability to hit the ball out of the ballpark. Pretty much anybody in that lineup 1 through 9. So anytime we're facing a pitcher against them, especially a guy with good stuff like Odorizzi, they're a decent GPP option because of their strikeout ability. But especially with that offense, I'm not sure I can take a guy like Odorizzi or really any pitcher against the Astros in cash. The final guy one of the final guys I want to discuss was Edinson Volquez against the Reds. Volquez has been excellent in 8 of his last 10 starts. Now that means he's been bad in 2 of those starts. Who are those 2 starts against? The Detroit Tigers when Miguel Cabrera was back, and the Toronto Blue Jays. So that's 2 of the better hitting teams in baseball. Some of the better hitters on the entire planet were in those lineups that Volquez had to face. So I'm willing to let those 2 go. Those other 8 starts, he was excellent. He pitched very well, and he's a very safe option. He faces the Reds today in Cincinnati, and it's a big boost for him because he has been pitching against American League teams, and he will pitch in a National League ballpark today, Great American Ballpark against the Reds. So if you want to use a little bit of a cheaper option in cash, maybe it's a starting pitcher too, Volquez is a decent option. Now, his upside is limited because he doesn't strike out a lot of hitters, but the fact is he pitches deep in the games and has an opportunity to get a win, which is big for a cheaper pitcher on FanDuel if you want to go cheaper and spend on bats. The last guy is my really cheap GPP option for the day. I like to find a cheap guy almost every day if I can. If it has a good matchup, maybe to fit some of the top bats that I wanted. Scott Feldman against the Tampa Bay Rays is my guy today. I don't really like him as a pitcher, and I wanted to get that in straight because one of the things about him is he gives up a lot of runs in a hurry. He struggles earlier in the game sometimes, but with the Rays being one of the worst offenses, probably the worst offense in baseball against right-handed pitching, I'm going to give Feldman a shot simply because he's looked good of late. In his last 9 starts, he has allowed more than 3 runs just twice and more than 2 runs, I believe, just 4 times. So he's been able to work deep into games, and the Astros are a very good team. They're winning a lot of games. So if you're going to use a cheap pitcher, and especially in GPP, I think Feldman's your guy, especially on FanDuel with that 4-point bonus for a win. So then you can fit pretty much any bat that you want. Now, the one thing about him on 2-pitcher sites is his cheap price. I know especially on DraftKings, it's under $6,000. He allows you to fit Clayton Kershaw in your lineups without having to pick a lot of minimum bats. So in GPP, you might want to, if you wanted some Kershaw shares because of his obvious upside, if you want to go with a guy like Feldman who has a decent matchup and has a little bit of strikeout upside, especially considering the matchup, he makes for a good play as a starting pitcher too to pair with the top pitcher on the day. Now, we just talked about using those guys in GPP, like a Kershaw, like a Scott Feldman. But you're going to need some cheap ones to fit those top bats. Now, if you want to use guys like Feldman, guys like Volquez, or even Odorizzi and Shields, you can fit a lot of cheap bats in GPPs and get a big score. Now, on Fantasy Feud, if you guys have seen, there's been some overlay. So if you guys want to use these cheap pitchers, if you want to find some GPPs with a lot of overlay, relatively playing like a 50-50 right now, be sure to go over there. They have a 500-person 50-50 or 500-person GPP rather at $2.20 an entry. So if you guys haven't done that yet, be sure to head over and join in. Now, for those of you that haven't signed up yet, Fantasy Feud has an excellent deal that you can use a referral code curve. You get up to 100% bonus on $500. So as always, RotoCurve, if you sign up with a deposit of $50 or more, we will send you $25 to use on that site. It's a heck of a deal, so take advantage of it if you haven't already. Those are my pitching thoughts for today. Just real quick, wanted to touch on the guys I will be using. If I can fit Kershaw into cash and be happy with the bats, I'm going to do it regardless of his price. That being said, I'm not sure it's going to be easy to do that, especially with some of the bats I want to fit in my lineups. So in cash, I might be going with guys like Volquez, guys like Shields. So right now on 2-pitcher sites, I'll probably be slotting in Shields as my top pitcher, but I'll still be waiting on some of those lineups to come out. Maybe I'll use a Volquez in cash. Maybe I'll use a Jake Odorizzi, depending on the Astros lineup, just based on some of those big bats. But if I can't do that, I'm going to try to fit a guy like Shields and Kershaw in, but that's only if there's really cheap bats to go with. On one pitcher sites in cash, I think you got to go with Kershaw, even though his price is absolutely absurd. It's easy to find some value bats on one pitcher sites like FanDuel, so you might be able to fit Kershaw into there. That pretty much wraps up my thoughts on pitching today. So be sure to take a look at the notes at the bottom of your screen underneath this video if you wanted to recap anything I just touched on, and use the rest of the tools up on RotoCurve. Everything's free, so you be sure to take advantage of everything. There's a bomb detector for GPP players that want to look at some home run matchups. There's a daily variable matchup, a little bit of a tool that shows some of the guys that have the top matchups on the day. There's a lot of other tools to use to your advantage. Just look at the tools tab and pretty much click away and see everything you want to use. Let's use everything to your advantage and hopefully make some money on Tuesday night. Good luck, everyone.